Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really controversial idea that could completely rewrite Japan's economic future. Some people think it's the magic bullet that could finally end a 30-year economic slump, while others, they see it as a huge, reckless gamble. So here's the billion-dollar question, right? Could one radical change in tax policy actually be the cure for 3 decades of economic stagnation in Japan? Let's get into it. So what is this big idea we're talking about? Well, right now, if a company builds a new factory, they write off that massive cost slowly, a little bit each year over a long time. The new proposal? Let them deduct the entire cost all at once in the very first year. It sounds like a simple accounting tweak, but the tax implications are absolutely massive. All right, so why on earth would anyone propose such a dramatic shift? Well, the people who support this see it as an essential catalyst, something that could seriously reignite the entire Japanese economy. Okay, so the folks who are for this, they basically build their case on 3 main pillars. First, it'll supercharge a company's cash flow. Second, it'll make Japan way more competitive globally. And third, it could fundamentally change how companies even think about investing. Let's start with cash flow, because this one's pretty easy to get. A gigantic tax deduction in year 1 means companies have a lot more cash in their hands right away. And what can they do with that cash? Well, they can pour it back into research and development, expand their operations, hire more people. It could create this powerful ripple effect, and that could be a total game changer, especially for smaller, scrappy businesses trying to grow. And look, this isn't just some abstract economic theory, right? This has real-world consequences. Supporters are pointing a finger directly at the United States, which rolled out a very similar policy back in 2017. Their argument is that we're in a global race for investment, and Japan's old-school, slower approach is putting it at a serious disadvantage. And that brings us to their third and maybe most interesting point. It's all about changing the entire mindset. The goal here is to get companies investing when it's actually a smart move for the business, not just because the tax calendar says it's time. Proponents argue this is way better than government subsidies because it encourages real, organic growth that companies decide on for themselves. Okay, so that's the optimistic view, but as you can imagine, not everyone is popping the champagne. There are some really powerful arguments against this and some pretty significant risks to consider. Yeah, opponents see this less as a cure and more like, well, dangerous medicine. They warn about 3 really severe side effects. It messes with basic tax fairness, it could blow a massive hole in the national budget, and it might actually encourage the wrong kind of investment. First, let's talk about fairness. Critics say this idea shatters a core accounting rule called the matching principle. Here's how to think about it. You're supposed to match your expenses to the revenue they help create. So if you build a factory that's going to make you money for 30 years, you spread that cost out over 30 years. Writing it all off in year 1, well, that gives a distorted picture of how a company is really doing. It could totally mislead investors and give a huge unfair leg up to big corporations over smaller businesses. And then there's the big one, the national budget. We're talking about a potential crisis here. In the short term, corporate tax revenues would absolutely plummet. And that would happen at the exact same time Japan is facing bigger bills for things like defense and social spending. Critics are really worried that this temporary tax deferral could turn into a permanent budget hole that the country just can't climb out of. And the final major concern is all about the quality of the investment. The worry here is that you'd get this mad dash at the end of the fiscal year with profitable companies just buying stuff, anything, to lower their tax bill. That's not productive growth. That's just wasteful spending that doesn't really help the economy in the long run. Okay, so we've got these 2 totally opposite views. Where do they really collide? This is where the debate gets really interesting. This is the absolute heart of the disagreement. And it all comes down to one thing: quantity versus quality. The proponents are basically shouting, hey, the problem isn't that we might get some bad investments. The problem is that we have no investment. But the other side fires right back, saying, whoa, hold on. Just encouraging any random spending is how you create an economic bubble. We need smart, productive growth. And what about that American success story? Well, this is another huge point of contention. One side sees the US as proof that this works and says Japan has to do the same thing to compete. But the critics are really skeptical. They argue that Japan's economy is just different, and that a policy like this could just end up being a giant tax giveaway to rich companies that are already sitting on mountains of cash. And the final battleground is all about the numbers, the accounting. Critics paint this picture of total chaos with wild profit swings on reports that will just confuse shareholders. But the supporters say, come on, you're underestimating modern investors. They argue that smart money looks at cash flow, not just accounting profit. For them, the biggest risk isn't a messy spreadsheet. It's the massive opportunity you lose by not investing right now. All right, we've heard the case for, we've heard the case against. So, where did the judges land in the actual debate this is all based on? What was the final call? And the verdict was the affirmative side. The winners were the ones arguing for making the change. Now, to be perfectly clear, this isn't us taking a side. This is just the official result from the formal debate that our source material is based on. So why did they win? Well, the judges pointed to three key things. They said the pro-change side did a better job of conveying the sheer urgency of Japan's economic situation. They also used that concrete example of the US policy really effectively. And finally, they powerfully shot down those concerns about financial chaos with a simple, potent argument. Today's money is always worth more than tomorrow's. And that really leads to the big idea that hung over the entire debate, summed up perfectly in this quote. It's this idea that connects a complex economic argument to a simple truth we all understand. Inaction has a cost. Sometimes the riskiest thing you can do is nothing at all. And so this whole debate leaves us, and more importantly, it leaves Japan, grappling with a massive question. What really is the bigger risk? A bold, maybe even dangerous leap into the unknown, or the slow, quiet, but potentially deadly trap of just staying the same?